Good morning. You're watching Much Ado About Something, and I'm Donna. I'm going to fix a cup of tea this morning. I think I'm going to choose some white clover. Some goldenrod. I've got some nettle already sitting out. I've got to get in here and organize this thing. Organize this tea cabinet. I've had a lot going on with summer being here and the grandkids being here. There's a lot of things that are being left undone. And the reason they've been left undone is because I've been concentrating on the important things, like spending time with my grandchildren. We got a slip and slide, or something similar to a slip and slide, and those kids have really been playing on that thing. And I've been out there with them, of course, supervising. So it's been pretty busy around here. Having 6 grandchildren, 11 and under, all the way down to 4, has kept me really busy. This morning I had a little bit of a sore throat, so I thought, let me just fix some tea. Go sit out on the porch for a little bit. Now that's something Southern Appalachian people love to do. They love porch sitting. So I'll be doing some of that this morning. Just getting ready for my day. Put some white clover in. I'm going to put some goldenrod. I'm going to make my own herbal tea this morning. I'm going to add a little bit of stinging nettle. I'm going to add some stinging nettle in here. And all this stuff I just choose according to its antibacterial, antifungal properties that all these different herbs have. So it's just a tea that I make. This is pretty finely ground, so I hope it doesn't go through my strainer, but if it does, I'll just go ahead and drink that nettle. Won't be that big of a deal. And I'm going to add some tangerine peelings into my tea this morning, since it's morning. And I'm going to add some Earl Grey black tea because it's morning, and that's something I feel like I need just to wake me up. And hold this. I can't hold this pot with my arm being like it is. It's harder to hold my teapot than it used to be. Yeah, I can see the I can see the daddle coming through the strainer, but that's okay. I'm going to let this steep for a few minutes. And then I'm going to go out here and sit on the porch and have a little cup of tea. I have definitely got to get in here and organize this tea cabinet. I've got many of my dried herbs that I gather. Some from my yard and some from foraging. And then I've got all of my other favorite teas in here. And tea apparatus like diffusers and different things here. Got a lot of stuff in this tea cabinet. A lot of good teas. I am a tea drinker, and I love to come in this cabinet and pick what I want to drink for the day. These are tangerine peelings that I've, cut in little pieces, and I'm letting it dehydrate. And as soon as that's fully dehydrated, I'll go ahead and put that in probably a paper bag or some kind of canister, and put it in the tea cabinet. We got our tea diffusing. I think it looks good and dark enough to go ahead and drink. Put a little honey in my tea this morning. Well, I'm sitting out here on the front porch. It is a muggy day. It's real humid and muggy. It looks like it might have come a light shower last night. Everything's not loaded and soaked like it rained. It just looks like maybe it came a brief shower. But it's real muggy out here. When it gets like that, it's really hard for me to breathe. So I don't know how long I'll be able to sit out here. But I wanted to come out here and just enjoy the morning. This is what I do when I can. I either come out here and sit in the front yard and look at everything, or I go in the backyard and sit down and sit on the deck and just be outside and look around in the morning. Well, I already have 2 of the grandchildren here, so they're inside playing with their new toys they brought, and I let them know where I'm at, so they'll be okay until I get this video made. I'll give you a view. I'll give you a shot of my view this morning. Now over here on these flowers, these blue flowers right here, there's hummingbirds all over them in the morning. It's hard for me to get a shot close enough for them for you to see them. And there's bees around there too. I was looking at my video from last year, and I had a whole lot more echinacea last year than I do this year. I don't know what is going on with that. I don't know why some of it didn't come back. So I'm going to have to make sure that I take care of that so it comes back every year. You can probably hear the bird song. And then of course right here where I'm at is the side garden. So and then back around, these are some things I've got to put out. It's a rain gauge and some jars, and then the outside quilt that stays out here. It's like a never-ending thing. I always have stuff I have to put up. I'm always dragging stuff out to use, and I'm always having to put stuff up. I've been a little bit behind on that because this shoulder's hindering me from lifting, so I hadn't been able to lift as much as I normally would to get things put back. So I feel a little overwhelmed. I'm sure everybody does, with projects and things that I feel like I need to get done that I haven't got done. But I guess I'll let them go this morning over my cup of tea. I'll just do what I can this morning. I'm not going to still really hot. I'm not going to worry about what I can't get done, and I'm just going to concentrate on what I can. Donald will be back in this afternoon, and he'll help me get a lot of the things put up that I can't lift myself. I've been having to lift tubs of clothes down so I can get the kids' bathing suits out because they've been on the slip and slide. So I usually have some clothes here for them so that they can just put them on and use them and hang them up, and then put their regular clothes back on. They don't have to worry about bringing a lot of stuff in and out. So Grammy has a lot of things like that here for them. But the reason I wanted to talk to you this morning is I have had a request, not just here on YouTube. I did have one here in comments, but I also have had several requests from other people to do more stories. There are people that want to hear more Appalachian stories. Well, I don't think that I could sustain a channel with my Appalachian stories. I'm not sure I have enough. Even having a lifetime of stories, I don't think I have enough to sustain a channel. But I will try to incorporate more stories into my content so that you can, just see a different culture and get a good laugh, or just the simple enjoyment out of some of the things that went on in the Appalachians when I was growing up. I am writing a book. I've started a book. It's been about 3 years ago now. It's still not finished, but in that book is a lot of things that happened, and a lot of stories and things that went on there in Appalachian Mountains. And of course, I'm not going to share too much of that. I'm not going to share too much of the stories that are in that book, because it seems like whenever you put anything out on the internet, it inspires other people. So I may put these stories out and there'll be somebody else's stories before I ever get my book published. So I'm going to keep a lot of those stories under wraps until I get that book published. Now, I don't know when that book will come out, because for some reason it's been extremely emotional, me even writing this book about my growing up in the Appalachian Mountains. It's just like reliving it all again. And of course, I'm going to tell it through the child's eyes and the person growing up. And now, of course, I'm a grandma. I'm a full-grown adult and then some. So looking back on the stories and the way I remembered them now, I have a whole lot more insight now looking back than I did when I was going through it. But the book is written in stages as I grew and was telling the stories. But I am going to tell you a story today that is included in the book. I still laugh about it to this day. It wasn't funny when it happened, but later looking back on it, that story has brought me, a lot of just laughter, and I hope it does the same for you. I hope that when you hear this story, that it makes you laugh as much as it did me. Now, I was probably about 4, which meant I had a brother that was 2 and a sister that was 6. Now, Appalachians, it seems like no matter where they end up, they're always near water. Now, I'm not near water here where I'm at, but I'm within driving distance of water, so I'm just going to count that as okay until I can do different. But growing up, we were always near water. We were always either near a river or a creek or even a lake, within driving distance of a few minutes of a lake. We just have to be near water. It's the sustenance of life. Of course, now we still go down the river. We love to tube down the river. We just love it. Well, when I was 4, Mom and Daddy lived in a lot of shacks. They lived in these little rent houses that they would rent in different places. So we moved around a lot when I was younger. I think it was only when I was about 9 or 10 that we stayed in that one house for 13 years. And that's the last house I lived in with Mom and Daddy. So I lived in that one house for 13 years. And then I married Donald and I left home. And then Mom and Daddy actually bought a house after I grew up and left home. They didn't stay in that very long because they divorced shortly after. But that house that I lived in for about 13 years, that house seems more like home. But this was way before that house. This was when I was 4 years old, and we had a little 2-bedroom house. So we had Mom and Daddy's room, a bathroom in between with no hot water. We didn't have hot water. And then a bedroom on the other side. So it was a little 2-bedroom house. And then we had a living room and a kitchen, kind of was one big room. The living room was on one side and the kitchen was on the other side. Well, Daddy was a carpenter. That was my dad's trade. He's always been a carpenter. He loved building, and he couldn't read or write that well. I think he had a 4th grade education. But he was a mastermind when it came to building, to dimensions, measurements. And he used to say, I'm not a good reader, but if you don't want me to know it, then don't let me see it, because that's how he learned. He could see something happen, he could see something, and he had a good vision. He had those good skills where he could build anything that he wanted. So he was a carpenter. Now, my dad was a very good-looking man. Now, he was 16 when he married Mama, 16 years old. Mama was 17. So they were just teenagers. Goodness gracious, I look back on that now and think. But that was a common thing. When you grew up and you started dating and you found somebody, if you fell in love with them, well, the natural course was you go ahead and marry them and start your life. It was consideration of your mother and father. It was a form of respect for you to get up and make your own household. Very few people lived with their parents in the area of the Appalachians where I'm from. And if they did live with their parents, it usually resulted from something like a disability, either on the child's part or the grown child's part, or on the parents' part. So, yeah, you got up in our culture and you made your own life, and you made it early. And this is the saying they would say: you made your bed, now you lay in it. You were expected to take responsibility for your decisions, in choosing a mate and getting out here and making a life for yourself. So if Mama was 17, then she was probably about 22 years old when this incident that I'm going to tell you about happened. Well, Daddy being a carpenter and us living in these rent houses that were pretty run down, they had to rent those kind of houses because it's what they could afford. Daddy had a 4th grade education. Mama had a 7th grade education. So they were not highly educated people when it came to the educational system, but pretty smart not to be formally educated. They had a lot of common sense, and they had a lot of sense that they learned from the people that raised them. So I never thought that I never thought of them any other way. I never thought of them as less intelligent. Now, there were times in us growing up where not having a formal education clashed heads with the educated. So, but Daddy had a love of education, and if he wasn't educated, he wanted to see us educated. But that's a whole other story. I'll just stick to the little story about the creek. Now, Mom and Daddy were outside on this. It had to be a weekend because if it wasn't, they would have both been at work. So they were outside working on this little 2-bedroom rent house that they had. And it had probably a good half acre or an acre. The neighbors were a good distance away. We had plenty of space to play. And we would run. There was grass in the neighbor's yard that was taller than we were. And we would get out there and just run out in that grass and just play. And we had an old shed. And there would be hornet bees' nests and stuff in there. And we were just constantly into something. But this day, Mom and Daddy were outside working on the front steps. They were going to rebuild the front steps. And Daddy would do that a lot. He would work on the house and the homeowner or the man that was leasing the house, the landlord, he would take money off of the rent for Dad and Mom, because they had, worked and improved the place, so they would give Mom and Daddy a credit on our rent. So Daddy was out there rebuilding the front porch. It was just a little porch and some steps. The old steps had rotted, so they were out there building it. And my dad was a type A personality. He was used to working with crews, and back in that day, he had just a hammer. There were no nail guns. Daddy built everything with a hammer. I still have one of his hammers. And I want to put it in the shadow box and some of his tools. But I won't be able to get that out and show it to you today. But one day, hopefully, I'll get to show that to you. And it was a summer day. I remember distinctly. We were out there. Now, we ran around when we were little, all the way up to you were about 7. You went outside and played, and you didn't have anything on but these little terry cloth underwear. I mean, that was it, And I've got a picture. I think my kids have shorts on, but I've got a picture of my kids when they were growing up, and they just had their little shorts on, and they were out in the driveway playing. That was how it was the way I grew up. You just was out there in your underwear, and you did that every year until you were about 7. During the summer, you just lived in. You swam in that, Daddy would make us a little pool or whatever. We would go swimming. We just had those little terry cloth underwear on. So we were out there. Mom and Daddy were working on the porch. Daddy's out there hammering away and barking orders to Mama on what to do. I mean, she wasn't a construction worker. She didn't know what to do. He had to tell her everything. And whenever he started a project, he was full force on it. He was going to get it done that day. So they were working on that stuff, cutting wood and nailing it on. And, well, of course, the kids, me and my sister, and my older sister, my younger brother, we just went over there to that little creek, which was right beside the house. We loved that creek. We used to catch little frogs, that just out of the tadpole stage, tiny little frogs. We would catch those little things, and we would put them in buckets. Well, there was also something else in that creek. We called them crawdads. There's, several other names people call them. They're in the mountains and in the south, Some people call them fresh water lobsters. They only get about 3 or 4 inches long when they're adult sized, but that's pretty big to a kid, right? So we were out there that morning, and we were catching crawdads in that creek. Oh, it was a beautiful day. The creek was cold, and I love the rocks and the moss and stuff that grows in it. I mean, it's just part of who we are, to be in a creek and see all those rocks and all those little animals and things. So we were splashing around in that little creek. It was probably up to our ankles, or maybe halfway up to our calf. We were little, so we had a bucket and we were catching things. Well, I caught a crawdad. There he was, as pretty as he could be. Well, I was inspecting him. He had pincers on the front, you know, and he was an awesome looking creature. I just thought, oh my goodness, this is the first time I've caught a crawdad. I've saw a lot of them, but I've never really caught one like this, especially one this big. So of course I wanted to go up there and show it to Mama and Daddy. Well, they were very busy. They were trying to get something done. They were trying to accomplish. And it was basically like, kids, just go play. Just go play. And sometimes in a firmer tone than that, you know, when you want your kids to go on and get out of the way and let you get something done. Well, I had tried to show Mama this crawdad. Well, she didn't respond to my showing her the crawdad. And it was a big crawdad. It was probably about 3 or 4 inches long. I know when I was little, it was as big as my hand. It was just big. I was so proud of it, you know. I thought, oh my gosh, look at this thing I caught. Well, they went on about to working. Now, my mama she's only 5 feet tall. She's a short little woman. And she's always, as long as I've remembered, been chubby or pudgy. You know, she was never a slim 5-foot woman. My grandmother on her side was a tiny little 90-pound slim woman. But Mama got the height of her mama and the size of her daddy's family. So she was just broad. She had broad shoulders and short, little, chubby woman, Appalachian woman, just as mountain as they come. Well, she didn't pay any attention to my crawdad, and they were busy. And she bends over, and there's Mama's butt, her big old butt, sticking in the air. And I thought, oh, I don't know what possessed me to do it. I mean, I was 4 years old. Who knows what's going through a 4-year-old's mind? But I remember it like it was yesterday. I took that big old 4-inch crawdad, and I just stuck it up to Mama's butt. And of course, it pinched on. Oh, gosh. And the reactions that I got was not what I expected. Of course, Mama commenced to screaming, you know, because this crawdad's pinching her butt. And she jerks up and she's screaming. And Daddy goes over there and looks. And he takes his hammer and he beats the crawdad off. Well, of course, I start crying because Mama's screaming and my crawdad is dead. You know, Daddy hit it with a hammer and knocked it off of Mama's butt. And there it was, you know. I was so proud of the big crawdad, and I was wanting to show it to them and share it with them. But they didn't have time to stop and look at it. They were busy, and I understand that now. I didn't understand that as a 4-year-old. And then Mama, she was so dramatic, you know. Of course, most people would be with a crawdad pinched onto their butt. But I was just so sad, and of course I was crying, and I was so upset because my crawdad was dead. But I look back on that now, I'm pretty sure I got a whipping. I'm pretty sure, which I rarely ever got a whipping. Rarely ever. I saw my sisters and brothers get a lot more whippings than I got, but I rarely ever got one because I always tried to listen to them. But this was just something out of the scope of my 4-year-old mind. I could not imagine, you know, the series of events that would happen that day. Of course, I don't know what possessed me to even stick that crawdad on Mama's butt and let it pinch her like that. I mean, it seemed like the reasonable thing to do. Here, I had this big crawdad, and there Mama was, bent over. And so, you know, it was just a logical thing for me to do. And then, of course, I was sad that, you know, Daddy beat my crawdad off, and that's the kind of man Daddy was. He was, if there was anything to be handled by him, he handled it. And he handled it pretty rough, you know, especially at that age. You know, he was probably 20, in his 20s. Mama was probably 22, so he was 21. I think they're about a year difference in them. But my goodness, and to this day, that memory is still fresh in my mind. That whole incident, I can feel the sun, I can feel the shade and looking around, the excitement of finding that crawdad, trying to show it to Mama and Daddy, and that whole thing happening just like it was yesterday. I can still remember that story. but it never fails whenever that comes to my mind to make me laugh. I mean, I will laugh at it until I cry just thinking about the whole absurdity of the whole situation. And the way it took place to me is just hilarious to this day. That's one of my Appalachian stories that I had, and that'll be in my book. Of course, that's just such a long-standing funny story for me. Maybe it was a thing where you had to be there, but if you can imagine Mama running around screaming, I mean, I'm not even sure. Looking back now, she probably didn't know what was pinching her. You know, she was been overworking, and I just clipped, I just stuck it up there and that little thing just pinched right on to Mama. And, I look back now, she probably didn't know if she was being bee stung, which she was allergic to bees, so she could have been very afraid, that was a bee sting. I'm not sure what she thought it was. But of course, Daddy raised up and saw the whole thing. There he saw, the crawdad on Mama's butt, and he, just, hit it with a hammer. How he didn't hit Mama's butt, I don't know. He just hit the crawdad and knocked it off. Of course, then Mama had to get her bearings. She had to figure out what went on. And there I stood, wondering what was going to happen after seeing my crawdad, I was upset about my crawdad, so I was crying. But, I don't know why Daddy didn't just reach over there and just pull it off, I don't know, but his first reaction was to take that hammer and hit that thing off of Mama's butt. It was his tool, and that's what he was using, and I guess he just thought, well, let me just do this. But that was my funny Appalachian story, one of my stories from my childhood when I was 4 years old. And we were out playing in the creek while Mom and Daddy were trying to improve the house we were renting for the landlord so they could get some money off the rent. There's some other hilarious stories. Oh my goodness. There's one about a squirrel I'll have to share with you on another day. That one is hilarious. It is to me. I don't know if it's funny to y'all or not, but to me it is hilarious. I hope you enjoyed this story. It was in response to some of the requests that I've had to share more stories from my Appalachian upbringing. And I actually am looking forward to sharing them with you. But I'm going to try not to share too many, especially of the ones that I've got in the book. So, and of course the best ones will be in the book. And I don't know when the book will come out because I've still got to write about a quarter of it. I have about 3/4 of it wrote out, and I'm handwriting it out. So I know that's crazy, but it just seemed the right thing for me to do. It was a good way to just go ahead and write it out to express myself. But I will let you know when that comes to fruition and when that book is available. I'll certainly let you know about it. And it'll be chock full of some funny things and then some pretty serious things that kind of happen up in that area. You saw a lot of those kind of things going on. So there's a little bit of that. I don't know that anybody grew up unscathed from some of the things that were up there. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful era and wonderful stories that are just uniquely from that area. And so it'll be a lot of fun to read that. And then also I had a request about some of the language that we used. And I know there's other people and other channels that share the language, probably more educated and more experienced at sharing the language and the words with you than I will ever be. But I can share with you what I grew up hearing and what those words meant. And as I have gotten older, I have found out that many other areas, many regions of the Appalachians use the same language. I always love to hear the Appalachian, when people are speaking in their natural Appalachian accent and telling me when I go back home and I visit, the area where, Mama's family's from, and the people there, I get so tickled because it takes me back, and I love to hear the people talk, and I know exactly what they're saying. But I may, if I can, gather a few words just here or there and share those with you. I think one of the words I wanted to share was gallivanting. And I think it's humorous now, but if you, like when I first got married, and Mama had called one time, and I wasn't at home. Then we didn't have cell phones. You had to use the landline. So if you were not at home when they called you, it was a great source of frustration to her for me not to answer the phone when she called. And I told her when I got back and she called and I answered the phone, she said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Well, Mama, I had to go get groceries and do a few errands." "Oh, you've been out gallivanting all over the town, and I've been trying to call you." And I was like, "Mom, it's okay if you go get groceries. That's part of life. But she was frustrated because I wasn't answering when she called. So I was gallivanting instead of getting much needed groceries and errands. I mean, Donald and I both worked at that time, and we had to have things for the week. I had to have things. But he worked second shift then, so I had a lot of evenings where I was alone, and that's when I ran and got the groceries. And of course, that's when Mama called, is when Donald was at work, because she knew, I'd be there by myself, so she would call. But gallivanting, that means out running around, having fun. You know, I guess that's what it means. That's what it meant to us, even though I was getting groceries and doing a much needed thing, to her I was gallivanting around and not answering the phone. So that'll be my word of the day that I'll share with you. That's my story, and that's my word of the day. Thank you for joining me today and let me share my story with you. I hope you look forward to hearing some other stories. I'm going to try to incorporate at least one story a week. Now, some of them are hilarious to me. I don't know how they'll be received. I hope they're received in the same way. It was a different time and a different era, so some things will be different. But I look forward to sharing them with you, and I hope you look forward to hearing them. Thank you for joining me and letting me share it with you. I hope you have a really good day. And like always, until next time. Look at Cookie. Look how sweet. She's cuddled up this morning.